Hello everybody, welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, bringing you a brand new review. And this time it is another 4K UHD review, and this is going to be for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, one of the longest titles of the year, and a film that might actually change its title in a year. We'll be talking about that right at the end, but the film is now out, available to purchase, as I mentioned, on 4K, on Blu-ray, DVD, digital, however you buy your films. It is available both here in the United Kingdom and in America and wherever you want to get them from. So, I've been very lucky to have a copy of this for a few weeks. This review's coming a little bit later. I wanted to wait till I got some of the special features, as we always like to review those. And with a film like this, with the marketing it had, everything we got to in the lead up, I was excited to get to the special features on this. So that's going to be something I'm talking about alongside, of course, the disc, the audio and whatnot. So what I'm going to begin with this is giving my thoughts on the film. Of course, it came out back in July. It's had its box office run. It came out before Barbenheimer. We all discussed it. We did our incredible retrospective series of some amazing guests that came on throughout and had a really good time. And a couple of months later, I still very much enjoyed the film. I saw it twice at the cinemas. I've of course seen it now. We've got the 4K that's come out. It's one that wanted to go straight into the collection. And it's been obviously interesting seeing what's happened with its box office run. Of course, we've had the SAG strikes, the WGA strikes, which of course we'll get to at the end when I talk about moving forward. But I was interested to go back to this. Not necessarily away from the hype, but when we do these series where we're building up new releases across 2 months, reviewing all the others, it is easier to be brought into that hype. So it was nice to watch it sort of out of context, back as a normal release, like I'd be picking it off a shelf. So what I will say about the film, I still very much enjoy it. I have a couple of issues with it, but very minor niggles, if you could call the issues that as well. So it's not anything I'm worried about myself. It doesn't affect my viewing of the film. I still love most of it. Of course, part 2, brackets, question mark, part 2, we're going to have to talk about. So there's still a few things we're waiting for there, titles, etc., etc. But I'm still a fan. And that's a great way, because when we are watching these films, again, when you take it out of context, as I said, it's really easy. And it happened to me in the past, other films I've adored that I've watched at home. And I've just thought, you know what? I don't know how I like that so much. And I haven't had this in Mission Impossible. So on regards to repeat viewing, great, nailed it. Wanted to pick it up anyway, because as it was at the cinema, it looked fantastic, it sounded fantastic. It's one I needed for the shelf. My biggest issue at the cinema is still something, of course, that would be on this, that they don't use the IMAX footage. Of course, Fallout did it incredibly with the aspect ratios going up to maximise the IMAX screen, and of course in the home media release. But obviously, with it not being that at the cinema, you're not going to get that on the 4K disc. So just get that out there to begin with. We don't have some of those now. Oppenheimer's out in a few weeks. I believe there's going to be over 40 minutes of IMAX sequences, so I'm going to be reviewing that when I get a copy of it. There are 3 hours of behind-the-scenes features on that film, so it might take a little bit longer to get this one. And I'm talking about special features of this. But I want to talk about the visuals, as I mentioned, first and foremost. It's always tricky doing this with some of the new releases, because we know the quality they shoot on, we see how great they look on the big screen at the cinema, and 9 times out of 10 that does transition great into 4K UHD. I will always say it depends on your TV settings, what you're using. Obviously, I have a 4K setup, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this review. And I'm very comfortable with my setup that I have. So I can't sit and talk about colours or whatnot. Obviously, with older films, when you get scrubbing and stuff like that, that's a big segue. But from a visual standpoint, I very much enjoy this disc, and I can recommend it off that. And even in line with the audio as well, which is a big thing for me. Once again, I'm talking Dolby Atmos. I love Dolby Atmos. I think I bought it a year ago for Top Gun Maverick. Literally, after that film, I was like, when the time comes to watch it at home, I need to do this one justice. So I picked up a Dolby Atmos speaker system. That's one of the reasons we've got into doing these 4K reviews, if I'm being really honest, was now I had a system good enough from my perspective to do these reviews, to do them accurately. That's where I am. Obviously, following on from Top Gun, we have Dead Reckoning. So I was excited to try it at home. Now, if I'm really honest, there's not as many sequences in this film as there were, of course, with Top Gun to pick from. Obviously, there's a lot of incredible stunts and whatnot, but the Dolby Atmos isn't like Top Gun, so I'm getting it out of my head. But I don't have an issue with the audio track. I think it comes across very clean. It's not as good, again, as Fallout, and I don't want to sit here comparing it to the last Mission Impossible film, but I guess when you're looking at the actual story, you're looking at the stunts, the mechanics, when the big moments of this are moments of silence, of the parachutes, the train sequence, it isn't necessarily going to be about the sound, what's travelling to and from, whereas Fallout, you have that incredible final sequence with the helicopter, so it's very difficult to compare the two. But its Dolby Atmos track is very good. And again, it's what I expect on a film like this. It's really unfair to call it on a review an expectation, to have high expectations, but when the Mission Impossible series has been this good, and Tom Cruise's recent action films have also been that good, it does build that up, and it does deliver onto the disc. Now, the big thing, the delay, is the special features. So, I'm going to be really honest, I was somewhat disappointed by the special features of this film. There's a commentary with Eddie Hamilton and Chris McQuarrie, as you'd expect. I haven't listened to the commentary. I'm going to be real honest, I've never been someone that's enjoyed commentaries. I know that's like a horrible thing to say for some people. Some people worship them. It's just never been something for me, really. I like listening to directors talking about their films. I like listening to Eddie Hamilton. I've listened to him on Light Views podcast many a time. So sadly, I know full well that if you're listening to that commentary, it's going to be fine. But that's not something that I would be watching. That's a bit unfair, but I'm not going to watch the film twice, I'm being really honest for this. And then that leads to some of the other special features. So I was gutted to see it had its own disc for special features. I was like, great, brilliant, like Oppenheimer, we're going to get a load. And there's just over 30 minutes total. And I'm like, okay, but quality, not quantity. And this is where I'm ever so gutted. There are 6 featurettes. Each featurette is a location where they shot in. Abu Dhabi, Rome, Venice, the train, and then we have the speed diving, and of course the main stunt, the motorbike stunt, the stunt we've all seen. And all of these are about 4 minutes in length, except the motorbike one. So I'm not going to go into them directly, but this is where some of my, not issues like, because it's still a great disc, and not everybody enjoys special features, but for those of us that do, for a film like this, with an ensemble cast, with loads of new faces, people that have great chemistry, people that lean towards this film being as good as it is, it's hard to not be disappointed by the special features. I like what we get. Small segments on these occasions, great. I just feel like a film such as this could have delivered a lot more, if I'm being really honest. And that's where I kind of am talking about these special features. I don't like doing, should have done this, should have done that. But when, for example, the motorbike stunt is the 9-minute sequence we got for Avatar 2 last year in IMAX, which was amazing, which I think functioned very well as its own trailer and did a lot to bring people in. I get you're not going to pad that out and do more with that stunt. And I like the speed diving dynamic because that's obviously a different sequence within the film. But the rest of it's like, look how great it is we're shooting this country. This is why we're here. And I just thought maybe we could have had a little bit more. I'd have loved to have heard a bit more from Greg Tarzan Davies. Haley Atwell in the leading role. Obviously, it's always about commitment of some of these actors. And as I said before, not to turn this review into hype up another podcast, but like the Fuse, I've had a lot of these on over the last few months. They're the official Paramount Mission Impossible podcast now. So if you want to find out a lot more of that info, you definitely recommend going over there, listening to them. They're doing great stuff. And it's a shame that we just didn't get a bit more on that disc because I do like that sort of thing and I appreciate that's not for everybody. So that's all I'm going to say with regards to special features. And this is where I'm sort of segueing into not making excuses for special features, but when it's a part 1 of a part 2. Sometimes I wonder, is it better off waiting to pick it up when part 2 comes out? In my head, I haven't upgraded 1 to 5 onto 4K yet. I have essentially waited, saying Dead Reckoning 1 and 2 are going to be the last 2 Mission Impossible films. When they're done, I'll get the box set of all of them in 4K. Obviously, we've had the news recently. They've, of course, delayed the release date by an extra year. And unconfirmed, but they will be changing the title to not be Dead Reckoning Part 2. Which actually, in theory, makes picking up this disc that says Part 1 as some form of vintage rare thing to come, because if they're retitling the film moving forward, then the Part 1's going to disappear down the line. When they do the inevitable box sets, when they do re-releases, Part 1's going to disappear from use. So that's one way to pick it up if you're into that sort of weird, trivial type thing. But for me, at least, thinking Mission Impossible, I know it's box office, it made $560 million off a $290 budget. That's not a profit. It needed to hit 600 mil for those that were curious about that, and it didn't. Of course, it didn't help releasing it 2 weeks before Barbie and Oppenheimer, a week after Indiana Jones. It was a very clustered summer, especially in that final month. And Mission Impossible lost its most viable asset, which is the IMAX screens. Of course, Oppenheimer shooting on IMAX. Utilising IMAX was always going to get that priority. You can read reports on that, however you'd like to read reports on that. But it's great to see that for the next film, they've already secured a 3-week IMAX run, which is exactly what it needs. And this is the big thing that's missing from Dead Reckoning for me. When Fallout's utilising IMAX aspect ratios and it's delivering on these incredible action sequences, and the follow-up film is doing that also, but you're not getting the IMAX sequences, you feel like you're losing something. You're losing some momentum. Like, why have they stopped with the IMAX? And that was my question back in July. It's my question now. It doesn't matter with the home media release, but that cinematic run, that cinematic environment, it felt missing when the film came out. And nobody can really look at it and think, well, yeah, we should have took Oppenheimer on less screens to put Mission Impossible out if it's not even gone for the full aspect ratio. So there's my minor thoughts on that. We know that the cinematic experience needs to be protected. We know what Tom Cruise did last year with Top Gun, and everybody involved in that film was remarkable for cinemas. So it made it a bit stranger this year that all that IMAX stuff was gone. Read into theories, whatever you want to read into, but for me that was a big loss for this film. It's not Mission Impossible's fault about the release date. Nobody knew Barbenheimer would be as big as it was. Mission Impossible was the first film to date itself as well on that July release date, before Indiana Jones, before Oppenheimer, before Barbie. So we've got to understand it was there first. And on paper, we all thought this was going to be the biggest film of the summer. We've all discussed it, but that's people in the sector, people in the industry. It was a big surprise, and an even bigger surprise to see Barbie and Oppenheimer make 1.4 billion and 950 mil each, counting. They could go up still with Oscar season, so it's not really their fault. Lessons to be learned, of course. I do hope there are. Maybe for them changing the title is that moving forward. And I know I've moved this from a Mission Impossible Ultra HD review into a discussion on the series, but it's a pretty important discussion. And obviously we've got the wonderful news this week that the SAG strike is now over. They've rightfully been given the contracts they deserve, protections of a lot of dodgy stuff the studios were putting in. Ironically, with this film, with the entity in AI, the timing of this in July was also quite surreal. It's even ended up in the political spectrum recently. I'm sure you've all seen that, but it's something interesting, something curious, and I hope moving forward the Mission Impossible films that, films plural, if it's going to be one more, two more, who knows, but I'm of course going to be there to see this. And ultimately, going back to the review, is it worth picking up the film? For me, yes. There's a very welcome place on its shelf for this on 4K. As I said, I'm still a big fan of the film. It's one of my favourite films of the year. It's got some of the best stunts. It's got some of the best action sequences. I love the whole train scenes. I'm just somewhat disappointed that the special features aren't there to match what the film has done. There's so much that went into this production I'd love to read more about. And whether they're hiding that for part 2 down the line, who knows? We'll find out in a couple of years. But in the meantime, that's going to do it for this review. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you're curious. Before to comment, let me know your thoughts. If you have picked this up, either saying the special features, maybe I'm the minority that don't like commentaries, I don't know, but do comment and let us know. It's a very busy time for the channel. I've got a couple more HD reviews I want to do. I've mentioned Oppenheimer already. I've had a Barbie 4K UHD review come out. There's going to be a home media series starting up properly in January in the new year. And we might have a couple of other films out between now and then I want to talk about. So that's going to do it for this review. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to join us on the next one. Take care.